Good morning, everybody. This is David from Valued here. Today, we're going to bring you an introductory session on just the day-to-day use of Xero, the online bookkeeping tool. It's going to be about 45 minutes long. So again, it's going to just cover the basic tools that you'll need on a regular basis. We're going to have a look at navigating around the tool. We're going to look at creating your own invoices to your customers, how to enter your bills from your suppliers. We'll look at reconciling your bank account, and then we'll round off with a few of the nice simple reports that let you know how your business is performing. So the first thing that we want to do is actually get into the software. If we go to Xero.com and click on login, the first thing it will do is ask you for your email address and password. Now, in my case, when I click on login, I've also got two-step authentication activated, so I need to pop in a code from the Google Authenticator app on my mobile phone. But once I've put that in, I'm then taken straight into my company data. So you can see here, I'm currently in the demo company. Obviously, this will display your company name when you get in. So this is the dashboard. This is effectively your one-stop shop when we get into the system so that you can see how you're doing. At the top, we have this blue toolbar, and we've got the various tabs along here that we'll look at. And then on the right-hand side, you've got a series of icons that we'll look at as well. And then underneath here, on just about every page within Xero, you have this help section, which will give you access to short video tutorials, related help articles dealing with the page that you're currently on. And then you'll see the body of the page as well here. So here we have your bank accounts on the left-hand side. We have a cash in and out summary on a month-by-month basis. We have an accounts watch list. And we then have invoices owed to you, and we then have bills you need to pay. So we'll go through each of these in turn and show you how easy they are to deal with. But let's have a look at these icons to begin with. Well, first of all, at the top right, there's my mugshot, and that's me. And if I click on that, it gives me the option to log out of the tool. Now, if I'm in a public environment, it really is good practice, if ever I'm moving away from my laptop, to click log out and make sure that nobody has any sort of access to my sensitive financial data. I also, within there, have the access to editing my own profile as well. The next option here is the question mark. And when I click on this, this is going to give me additional help options as well. So I could, for example, type in a keyword search of something that I'm looking for. It will give me a series of quick access articles regarding the page that I'm currently on. And then here it will give me overall access to Xero's Help Center. So this opens up in a separate tab. But again, I then have access to the full help database within Xero's records. So I could do again a keyword search, or I could look at popular topics and get straight to what I'm looking for. Also within that help dropdown, there's an option at the bottom to contact Xero support. So if I wanted to send an email off with my query, Xero will get back to you within 24 hours. Generally, they're much quicker than that. But again, they will deal with you on an email basis. You'll see also here you have an option to find an advisor as well. If you're a client of ours or of any other accountant who's using Xero, then usually it will be our details in there and it will give you access to contact us. I would generally suggest either picking up the phone or sending a direct email, but it's whichever way you prefer to communicate. The next item here is just the alarm bell, and this will give us any notifications about any organizations that you have access to and Xero notifications as a whole. We then have the magnifying glass. And when we click on this, this gives us access to, again, a search function within your data. Now, it doesn't work within the demonstration data, but it does in the standard companies. You could search for client names, invoice amounts, all sorts of things within that. We then have the plus symbol, which is really a quick way on any page within the system to add any of these items. So I could quickly raise an invoice, add in a bill, create a new contact, etc., etc. So then what about the tabs on the left? Well, we're already on the dashboard, and that's all that's within there. But if we click on the drop down by the company name, then we have access to, for example, if you're an accountant, items such as Xero HQ, My Xero, that's also for standard users as well, but then work papers and practice manager. If you do have access to, for example, Workflow Max, again, wholly owned by Xero, you will be able to access it through here as well. You can see you also have access to the app marketplace for Xero too. Most importantly though, we have a files library. So if we were to click into this item here, we would be able to see that we can upload any documents or images, or whatever it is that we may need at a later date for storage here for future use. We can also, from this drop-down option, access our settings menu. Now again, we don't really need to go into that at this stage, but it's used very much when we're setting up the system as well. I'm just going to click on Dashboard and bring us back to our starting point. So we then have the Business tab. And when we click on this, we have access to your invoices, your quotes and your sales overview. We have access to the bills that you need to pay, your purchase orders, and an overview of your purchases. And then we also have access to Xero's Expenses Claims tool, and then its list of products and services. Now, expenses is an additional function. It's not part of the basic purchase, but products and services does come as part of the standard package. The next tab is the Accounting tab. And within here, it depends on your level of access as to what you will be able to see. Certainly, we have access to your bank accounts in greater detail. We have access to your full report library, and potentially you might have access to advanced functions as well. Now, in terms of the reports, anything that we have added as a favorite report will be listed under this starred section here. So you can see I have my age, payables and receivables, my cash summary, profit and loss, VAT return, etc. You can also see that under the advanced section, I've favorited certain functions. So I can look at, for example, my chart of accounts, or I could create a manual journal, etc. So what about the next tabs? Well, payroll and projects, again, it depends upon what you've purchased. There's always a small number of staff available when you have the standard subscription to Xero. So you can set up your payroll if you've got a small number of staff within there. Again, we'll have other videos in the series detailing the payroll processes within Xero. Projects, again, is an additional purchase and does give you a nice entry-level tool to be able to manage your projects and deal with time entries and project-based invoicing. We then have Contacts, which again, everybody would have. When we click on this, we can see we have access to all of our contacts, or it is broken down into customers or suppliers. You can also create your own groups within here. So if you have certain groups of contacts who you want to deal with together, again, we can use those. So that's the tabs at the top. But what about the main body of the dashboard? Well, in most cases, the most important item that you'll be looking at is getting paid. So let's look at invoices owed to you. You can see from this little section here, you've got your invoices broken down into several sections. So we've got draft invoices, which you have not yet finished raising. We've got those invoices awaiting payment, and then a subsection of those as the ones that are overdue and have not yet been paid. We can also see this information reflected in terms of this bar chart. It'll show you what's overdue, and you'll see as we go through many of these items, they highlight and underline. Anything of such is a hyperlink, and we could then simply skip straight through, for example, on the overdue invoices, to that particular list. So here I can instantly see at a glance those customers who have not paid me within the due date of their invoice and who I would need to chase straight away. Because I'm on a browser, it's either a case of clicking on the dashboard, or I can simply use the back button within my browser to come back to the previous screen that I was looking at. So dead easy to control. And again, you can see all of that information very quickly. If I was wanting to raise a new invoice, then I can simply click on New Invoice. And as we'll see, this is simply a form to fill in. So I'm going to start by putting in who this invoice is to. I'm going to say that this is for Bayside Club. And as I start typing, you can see that it's thinking ahead and trying to give me options as to who this might be for. I could select one of the existing contacts, or I could create a new contact here. As it is, I'm going to select Bayside Club. Now again, if I use my tab key, I can move through these fields. So here is my due date. I might accept it as today, but when I tab to the date I'm raising the invoice, but then if I tab through that, it will bring me to the due date. And I could do something rather clever, such as putting in, say, +7. And then when I tab, it will add 7 days from the date of the invoice to be the due date. As you saw there briefly, I can click on the drop-down arrow and I can select a date from the calendar that's built in. So if this needed to be slightly longer, I could pop that in. Alternatively, I could just simply type in a date. So I'm putting 20th of December, and when I tab through, the system understands what date that is. We're then brought to the invoice number. And again, this is a number generated by Xero itself, but it is still customizable by me. So as long as it's unique, I can make that say anything I need it to. The reference, well, that stands to reason. That's any reference that you want to pop onto this invoice. And then we have an item called branding. Branding themes are just that. They are different styles of invoice that we can send out to your customers. So we can either have what Xero calls standard themes, which are very simple to produce, and again, very easy for you to set up, or you can have custom .docx templates. Now, they can be a little bit more complex, but they do give you a lot more flexibility. But in general, it just gives you a nice capability to send out very different invoices where the need arises. I'm just going to pick something that'll probably make our hair stand up when we see it, but we'll have a look. So after that, we have a little files logo. When I click on this, you can see that we have the option to either upload a file directly against this invoice. So again, if I had, say, a document of terms and conditions or a signed agreement or a photograph of any work, then again, I could attach that here. But I also have the option of adding a file in from the files library that we saw before. Moving down the details within the invoice, we can now see that on the left-hand side, I have an option for currency. So what I can do here is I can drop this list down and select any currency that I wish. If it's not listed, I can very simply add a currency by clicking through and then selecting from this list exactly which currency we're looking at. You'll see that Xero deals with xe.com, and on an hourly basis, it will update this rate so that whenever we're raising our invoices in foreign currencies, it's always accurate. Those rates are stored as well, so if you're entering anything historically, it will always use the correct exchange rate. I'm just going to put this back to GBP just for simplicity at this stage. On the right-hand side, we can see that we then got a tax treatment for the invoice. So currently it's telling us that amounts will be tax inclusive. I could change that and make that say tax exclusive, or if the items weren't to be VATable, then I can make it say no tax. If you're not VAT registered, then this will always default to no tax. For now, I'm just going to keep it as tax exclusive. So then into this main table within the invoice. The first column says item, and this is referring to those products and services from the products and services section. So these can be predefined items that allow us to quickly and easily fill in a line on an invoice. Items or products and services will fall into two categories. We can either have untracked items, where simply they are used to, as I said, fill in this invoice line very quickly and very easily. Alternatively, we can have tracked invoice items, where the system itself will then monitor how many stock items of this particular product we have. As we buy items in using a bill, then that number will go up. And as we sell items through using an invoice, that number will go down. We can see within here, this has populated our description, our quantity, unit price. It hasn't filled in a discount for us, but we can do that manually ourselves. This is always based on a percentage. It's then filled in the sales account. And in here, if we wish to, we can always amend this for one of the other codes that we may have set up in the system. We can see that this is then prompting a sales tax amount. So in this case, 20% VAT on income, and that is related directly to that particular sales code. Regions refers to an item that can be set up but isn't mandatory, and this is a tracking category. Now, we'll not deal with tracking categories in this video, but we will have a look at it later on in another one. We then get the total amount for the line. So by way of example, if I was buying 2 of this item, we can see that that amends our amount, and this then tracks down to the totals at the bottom. So we can see we have our amount plus our total VAT, and then our grand total. Now, I don't have to use items. I could simply type in a description. I'm going to just put something quick in here. We're buying a shelf. It was for £25. There's no discount on this. I'm going to put it to other revenue will do. And we can see that that's then adding in to our total there. But we can do other things with lines and descriptions. So here, for example, I'm going to put in just a message line. This will give me the opportunity to say anything to my client that I wish to within the confines of my invoice. So I can move these lines up and down using this option on the left so that I can have these in any order I wish. I also have the option for adding further lines to the invoice. I can either do them individually or I can do them in batches of 5, 10 or 20, whatever works for me. I can also use the cross on the right to remove any unwanted lines from the invoice as well. Now, if I'm not quite finished producing my invoice, I can always click Save, and this will become a draft invoice for me to then review and complete later on. Alternatively, if I'm happy with my invoice, I could click on Approve. And again, I have the drop-down option within here to do additional functions such as approve and add another, approve and print, etc. I'm just going to approve this for now. We could also cancel the invoice if we didn't want what we'd produced so far. So once I have approved my invoice, we can see that this is now giving me everything that I had before. The invoice number already exists. Well, let me pop in a new one. There we go. Xero will always keep you right on things like its numbering system. So when I approve that, and when it comes through, there we go, we can see that at the top of the invoice, I now have a new series of options. So the first one there is I can preview the invoice if I wish. So when I click on this, it's going to give me just a summary of the information regarding my customer and myself. And we also have an option to view the PDF, or at least we would if we were on a live data. We also have the option for viewing this in either a laptop or desktop format, or by looking at it as it would be displayed on a mobile device. We then have the option to email the invoice. I'll come back to that in just a bit. I could print the invoice. Here it will give me the option to mark this as sent. So if I'm physically giving this to my customer, I could do so. I'm just going to leave it as is at the moment. And let's see what my very orange branding theme looks like. Oh, there we go. Well, if any of you have invoices that look like that, do get in touch and we'll be more than happy to discuss helping you make a much nicer looking invoice that's not quite as hard on the eye. But you can see here we've got all of the details again with regard to the customer and ourselves. We've got our company logo. We've then got the body of the information from the invoice itself. We've also got any online payment information that our clients might be able to use. Again, it depends on what services you've subscribed to. But then at the bottom of the invoice, we also have the option of adding in a remittance advice. So this tear-off slip your customers could send back to you to let you know that they've paid your invoice. We also, on the right-hand side, have invoice options at this stage. So here, I could turn my invoice into, say, a repeating invoice. So if this needed to go out to the client every month and was exactly the same, we could simply make that automatic. I could void the invoice if it's no longer required. Once we've approved an invoice, we can no longer delete it, but we can certainly void it. I could copy the invoice to something else. So if I was raising this infrequently, then I could copy it to another invoice and it would complete all of those details for me except the date. Or I could copy it to a quote, or I could copy it to even something like a purchase order. I could edit the invoice, and this gives me access once again to all of the various fields that I filled in before. So if I need to amend the details of my invoice, I certainly can. I could credit my invoice, and again, the suggestion by the system is that you're wanting to credit the remaining balance of the invoice. Again, I can still change the details of that credit note. So if I only wanted to credit off 1 or 2 lines or a certain amount, I can then make those changes within that credit note. And then I have the option to share the invoice. And this will provide me with a link that I can add into emails of my own design or anything else that I wish to place that link on. So what about email? Well, when I click into this, it gives me quite a bit of information. So I can see here that it's got the email address that is attached to my client record, and it's using a basic sales invoice template, which defines the wording that's included in the body of the message. I can still edit this to say anything that I want to, and from there, it's up to me what I include. But very useful is this link here, which allows my client to then click and view my invoice online. I can send them, by ticking a box at the bottom, a PDF attachment of the invoice itself. We'll discuss just now why I might not wish to do that. We can also send them any other files that I've attached to this invoice. And I can even send myself a copy as well, if I wish to. Well, why wouldn't I want to send a PDF of the invoice? It all comes down to traceability. If I can encourage my client to click on this online link, then I'm going to get notification that they've actually seen this. So where would that appear? Well, for now, let me just pop in my email address here, and I will send this through to myself so that we can see what happens. I'll draw your attention to the bottom of the invoice here where we have history and notes. If I wanted to click to add a note, then I could add in any information in there regarding contact with, with my customer, or I could add in any sort of expected payment date. It's entirely up to me. What I also have is a history section. Now we're going to come and have a look at that in just a moment. I've received that communication. So when I click through, I'm going to see there is my invoice from my supplier, me. It's got my Pay Now option, and it's also got the option down here, that link to view and pay the bill online. When I click on this, it takes me through to a page where I can see all of the details of my invoice. Yes, there it is, bold as brass. And if I wanted to click on Pay Now, I could go ahead and pay my bill. It's been proven that the easier you make it for your clients to pay you, the sooner they will do so. So again, anything that removes barriers is a good thing. Now, here's the fun part. When I click onto my history section now, let me just refresh this page. We will see that at the bottom, I have 5 items in my history. And when I click on this, it's going to show me that I created the invoice and approved it today at this time. I then sent the invoice via email to this email address. And then I put in an expected payment date. That was the note I added. But most importantly is this one, that the invoice has been viewed online. So again, I can tell straight away that my client has seen that email. If we don't do it that way, if we don't get them to click on the link, they could say they haven't seen it and I can't really prove otherwise. Lastly, within the invoice screen, we have this option for receiving a payment. I wouldn't suggest that we use it on a regular basis. The idea here is that if your payment hasn't cleared the bank yet, but you know that you've been paid for this, you can add the payment in here. So again, we can say when we received the payment, we can say what bank account we received it into, we could pop a reference on, and we could add it and say that that is now paid off. And that is invoicing. So when I come back to my dashboard, I'm going to see straight away that where I had 12 invoices before, I've now got 13. So if I click into that awaiting payment section, here is the invoice that I raised today. There's my date. And if I click on it, that will take me straight back in to the invoice that I was dealing with. So very easy to navigate through. So let's have a look at bills you need to pay. It's laid out in a very similar fashion. So here we have again any draft bills that we haven't finished adding to the system. We've got those bills awaiting payment, and then obviously we've got those bills that are overdue and we need to get paid as quickly as possible. We can see again, there's our bar charts at the bottom, and if I click onto new bill, we'll see that this is laid out in a very, very similar fashion to the invoice screen. So when this loads, we'll see that again, I can put in my supplier, and your contacts can be both customers and suppliers. I can select a date for my bill that I've received, and I can say when it's due. I'm going to say in plus 30. We could have a reference in there, and we can see that it's got a currency and a tax treatment. I'm going to leave it as tax inclusive for now. Here, we can then have the description. We can have the quantity, the unit price, and we can say what account this belongs in. So in other words, what have we spent the money on? So here we've got a rather large list of items which can be added to. I would always say if you need more codes in here, contact us or your accountant and they will certainly be able to help you add those in. So I'm going to put this to entertainment for the business. So we might have been entertaining some guests. We can see that there was 20% VAT, And here you can see that because it's tax inclusive, it's then working out from that £250 what portion of it was the VAT. Again, just like any other screen, bills or invoices, all I need to do is click approve, and that now becomes a live item which forms part of my bookkeeping figures. I similarly have that make a payment section at the bottom. So again, if I know I've paid this bill, but it hasn't passed through my bank account yet, I can add it in here. There's another use that we'll have a look at for this in just a moment. Again, in terms of bills, once we've approved it, we do have the option to print it, although I don't know why you would. We do have the option of adding in a file. So if we have a photograph or a PDF copy of the bill, we can very cleverly attach it here, and that forms a great resource. Or if we've got the bill options, very similarly, we can repeat this on a regular basis. We can void it if it's no longer needed. We can copy it if it's required infrequently. We can edit it or credit it. And that'll bring us back to the dashboard again. So as we continue to add these items in, we can monitor these through these two sections, invoices owed to you and bills you need to pay. But what about the accounts watch list? Well, this is simply a list of those codes, whether they be for income or expenditure, that are of interest to you on a regular basis. So you can pop them on this dashboard watch list and you can keep a weather eye on them. So this could be your key sales figure. It could be a key expenditure. Here we've got our entertainment. And all that we would need to do to understand more about these amounts is to simply click on a figure. So when I click on, for example, the amount we've spent on entertainment, we can see straight away what our overall expenditure has been. So if I click into December, I can see that's made up of 2 separate bills. Again, I can click on the bill in question, and that will take me straight through to what I saw before. So how do we add items to the dashboard watch list? It's actually fairly simple. One thing that we can do within here is click onto accounts or accounting, and we can go down to the chart of accounts. So this is going to show us a list of all of those codes in our system. We can search for a particular code. So I might search for, let's put it to heating. I might be wanting to track the heating. And when I search for this, it's going to find the relevant code. When I click into it, I can see that at the bottom left, I have some tick box options, and one of those says Show on Dashboard Watch List. Now, when I save that, when I come back to the dashboard, we will see that heating, lighting, and power will have been added to the dashboard watch list. Now, it might be tempting to add lots and lots of codes here so that they're easily visible. I would always advise that this should be just those codes that you really want to keep a close eye on. So don't pack this out with too many items, otherwise it kind of gets a little bit confused. As far as the bills were concerned, I did say there was one other option. And again, because we've just looked at a code within the chart of accounts, I'm going to show us that again. If I go down to the chart of accounts, and if I pick up any code in here, I'm actually going to pick up one called Funds Introduced. So there we go. When I look at this, there's another tick box option at the bottom that says Enable Payments to this account. Now, what that refers to is that we may, for whatever reason, need to make payments from somewhere other than a bank account. The most common reason for this would be where we, as an owner-operator, are putting our own money into the business, which the business then owes us back. So how would we do that? Well, if I'm paying the business's bills out of my own money, when I look at those bills, I can quite easily click onto whichever one I know I've paid, and then at the bottom of that bill, I can use Make a Payment. I can say when it was that I paid this, and I can say where I paid it from. And because I selected Enable Payments from this account, there is Owner A Funds Introduced. So when I then click Add a Payment, that's doing exactly that. So when I come back to my dashboard, because I was tracking this as part of my dashboard watch list, I can see straight away that under Owner A Funds Introduced in this month, I've personally spent £242, which really the business then owes me back. It's just a great way of keeping track of what you've spent. So this then brings us on to the left-hand side of the dashboard and the bank accounts. Your bank accounts really do form the cornerstone of working within Xero. Obviously, we're raising bills and entering invoices, but we need, raising invoices and entering bills even, but we need to know that these have been paid. When we look at this, the bank accounts within Xero usually have a direct connection to the bank in question. Now, those direct feeds will bring information from your bank account directly into Xero, usually on a daily basis. And as those transactions are brought through, they will show us a number of items that we need to then reconcile. What this then will do is tell Xero that these amounts have been handled, and we have our two values here, your statement balance and the balance in Xero. Once we have completely reconciled all items, we would hope that these two values would become one of the same amount. So how do we reconcile your bank? Well, if we click onto Reconcile, it will take us through to this screen. We can see we've still got our two values at the top, and you can also see that you do still have a help section, which is giving you further information if you need assistance. But then on the left-hand side, we've got a list of all of those statement lines, which we then need to take care of. On the right-hand side, Xero is trying to be as helpful as possible with this, and it's going to start making suggestions as to what can be done with these items. Excuse me while I take a quick drink. As far as these green items, Xero is trying to match off by value what you have already entered into the system with a statement line of activity that's gone through the bank. So here, for example, we can see that we've got a payment against a bill to our supplier, Truxton Property Management. So on the right-hand side, we've got that payment. On the left-hand side, we've got the fact that that's now left the bank. Because it's the same monetary value, Xero is flagging it in green, and we could click OK at this point. If this matched more than one item that we've entered into Xero already, then it would also give us an option to review those other options, those other items, and decide which was the correct match. If we're happy that this is correct, then we can simply click OK, and that is reconciling that line of bank activity, and this is effectively closing that one off. That was where we had a payment in the system. Where we have an open invoice, here an invoice to our customer, and this is Ridgeway University, we can see that this is represented here by a single direction arrow, and this means that we haven't got a payment against that invoice yet. If I see that this is an accurate match and I click OK, this is going to reconcile the line of bank activity, and it's going to put a payment against that invoice. Hence, we don't really need to add payments to invoices and bills on a regular basis. It will all happen automatically as part of our bank reconciliation. We do have other options within here. Here is an example of where we can discuss an item. So if we click into the Discuss tab, and if we type a message in, this will be flagged as a notification to your advisor. So they will then be able to see this, review the item, and give you any appropriate advice. We can also see that if we have nothing matching here, so here we've got an invoice, well, we've got money coming in from Jacaranda Maple Systems. If this does not match an amount, then we can simply tell the system what this was about. Now I've got to admit, and here it's asking me to add in a new contact, so we obviously haven't created anything yet. I would personally want to go and add my invoice, because it's always good practice to make sure if your clients are paying you that you've sent your invoice out to them so they have the evidence. But here, if I put in Jacaranda Maple Systems as to who this is to, the what, I would simply say that this was sales. And you can see as I type ahead, it's finding that code for me. I could say what it was for, services. And you can see that it's automatically selecting a VAT rate based on my code. I can override that and say whether or not it is VATable or at what rate it was VATable. And again, once I'm happy with the details, I can simply click OK, and that is now part of my figures within my system, and it's also recognized that that line of bank activity has been reconciled. But what if we are paying, for example, our suppliers, and we're paying off more than one bill at a time? Well, obviously it's not going to match an individual bill. So here we have an option for find and match. So when I click on this, I have the option to search for example, names of my contacts, references, amounts, etc., I'm going to search for the name of Smart Agency to see what I can find. And at this point, I have two items, and when I select them, these will provide the same value as the amount that's left my bank, so I have a match. So again, when I click OK, this is going to mark off both of those bills as having been paid. But it doesn't end there. Xero is very clever, and it will try to assist us when we do things that it considers to be on a regular basis. Here, where I've got some purchases from Cooper Street Bakery, I'm just going to put something in here, and this is going to be for general expenses and for food. Maybe we bought some sandwiches for the office or something like that. When I click OK on that, again, it's popped that in as part of my figures and reconciled the line of bank activity. But then if I were to come back here later, I'm reconciling again, can you see that it has now suggested that I might want to do the same thing again? So even without bills or invoices, the system is learning. At this point, again, I can simply click OK on that, and that's absolutely fine. So that could be for, again, purchases we've made with suppliers. Here's an example for bank fees, etc. There is another option, and that is that if we have regular purchases or regular income, we could potentially set up what are called bank rules. Now, bank rules are simply a way for us to tell the system what to do. So in this particular case, when I look at the rule, it's saying where the payee contains the word 11, put this to our contact for 7-Eleven, and set the information to describe this as miscellaneous corner store, put it to our general expenses account, and that's it. So then when we click back and we look again at the bank reconciliation, where that is the case, it is automatically dealing with this for us. So at that point, I can just click OK, and that's it. It's all taken care of. If we want to create rules like that, it's as simple as clicking on Create Rule on the left-hand side. The final item within here would be if we had, for example, transfers from another bank account. So here I've got £1,000 that I may have transferred in from, say, my savings account. In this case, all I do is click on Transfer. I select the relevant bank account, and I can put a reference in if I want. But then when I click OK, that reconciles the activity in this bank account, and it automatically creates a transaction against my savings account so that that will be flagged in green and ready for me to reconcile. In a nutshell, that is bank reconciliation. It's really good if you can do this on a regular basis, whether it be daily or weekly, and that prevents a huge amount of items backing up and making it harder to do or take longer. If we can do it in small, bite-sized chunks, then this never gets out of hand and is just really easy to deal with. Other items within the bank accounts, we could, for example, look at our bank statement lines, or we could look at the account transactions. So these would be, for example, the payments that we've added against bills and invoices. We can create new items, so spending and receiving and transferring money. None of these deal with bills or invoices. They just stand as transactions on their own. Or we could go in to reconcile the account, set up bank rules, manually import a statement if for any reason our bank does not link to Xero. Or we can even go and look at the reconciliation report to see what else we need to do to make our figures match. So that is the dashboard. That is invoices owed to you, bills you need to pay, the accounts watch list, and bank reconciliation. That's pretty much everything that we need to cover. After that, the only things that we would really want to know is how our business is performing. So that's where these simple reports come into their own. I can run, for example, my profit and loss report and see very simply on a single click exactly how my business is performing. So I can see my income for this month and my previous months and a year-to-date value. I can see my expenditures, and I can see where I've been spending and how much and when. And at the bottom, I can see whether I've been making a profit month by month. So if there was anything I wanted to review, so for example, advertising and marketing in November, I spent a very large amount of money, I could click into this. It will show me the individual bills that made up that amount. And when I click on it, it will give me all of the details as to what that expenditure was actually about. Again, because I'm on my browser, I can just click back to bring me back through to the report itself and review any further figures. I can similarly look at perhaps my VAT return. So if I'm a VAT registered business, this report represents my VAT 100. So I can see all of my individual boxes and the values in them, and it will give me a running total of my current VAT liability. Now I could review this, for example, on a month-by-month basis through the quarter and see exactly how my VAT liability stands. I also have a tab for the VAT audit report within here, and this gives me a breakdown of everything that's making up those figures. So again, if I wanted to review this or potentially make any changes if I think something isn't right, then I can review this audit report to ensure that I've got everything I need. There's all sorts of reports that you can access within here. If you do go into the reports option, then you will see an expanded list of reports, which nowadays within Xero, we've got lots and lots of choice as to what we might wish to review. Anything that you want to appear in that drop-down list, you can see how we have these little blue stars next to them. So for example, if I wanted to run a supplier invoice report, I can simply put that star on, and when I go to my accounts list, there's my supplier invoice report. So again, very easy to access depending upon what we want to run. So let's say I wanted to look at my aged receivables. I can see straight away who owes me what and from when. I could choose to show the individual invoices within this report, and it will show me exactly which invoices are still outstanding with which customer. Any report that I am running within Xero, I can then deal with in several different ways. I could print it, which is okay. It doesn't look amazing, but it still works. Or I could, for example, export it. So I could export it as an Excel document, or I could export it as, say, a PDF. Now, those PDFs are very clean and tidy. They look very professional. And again, depending upon any information that, let's say, my bank might need to see, I could produce this in a very tidy format. I can also, within here, choose to publish a report. Because Xero is a live system, then anything that I want to keep for future reference from a previous period, I can publish it as a snapshot, and this will give me all of that information as it stood at this moment in time. So again, when I publish it, it will then sit within that reports section under this published tab. And again, from there, I can delete it if I wish to, or I can simply keep a hold of this for when I need it. And that is pretty much it for this video. Again, I hope you found it useful. Obviously, this is just the beginning, an introduction to help you use Xero on a day-to-day basis. We'll be producing more videos about the other functionality within Xero, so do keep tuned to the channel. And if you do want any further assistance, do feel free to get in touch and we'd be more than happy to help. Thanks for now though, and thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.